Let's see if I can get back. Hang on, our system's not quite working well, but as you can tell, our dues are fairly reasonable. If you're not a member of the league, we highly encourage you to do so. Let's see, there we go, finally. We are on Facebook. We do have a website. And again, our dues are fairly, we've not raised our dues this century. We have just started offering a complimentary membership to those 30 and under. As you can tell, we as preservationists tend to age a lot, and so we thought it would be best to get some more young adults involved in this process. So students, college, high school, young adults are invited to 30 and under, are invited to join the league at no cost. We do have forms over here, and Kim has that you can apply to become a member of the league at no cost.
That's great.
Some recent events that we've had, numerous events, fun stuff. Our program schedule, again, we're here on March 26th, where we've got a full series of things that we've got ongoing. Our next event's going to be at Locust Grove. John David Miles is going to be talking about his Walter Kaiser book. Look for that. We got a new walking tour, and then an ice cream social at Nunlea. So we like to get out and about and visit the places where history was made, and that's one good thing about the league. We also, on our Facebook page and Instagram, we're on Instagram now, we're doing a This Date in Louisville History. And nothing appeared today. There was nothing significant that happened on March the 26th. But tomorrow, March the 27th, is the anniversary of the 1890 tornado. And so that will be a pop-up on your Facebook and Instagram site tomorrow. We also do periodic surveys and polls on our Facebook and Instagram. We just recently did one talking about Louisville's historic department stores, which are no longer around. So those pop up and you can respond to those. We get a lot. By the way, one of our posts just recently had 1,300 views on it. We get at least 200 to 300 people a day on our Facebook and Instagram accounts. One of them had 1,300 people on it. So we get a lot of social media right now. That's what we're really concentrating on, is social media. Kentucky Historic Markers. We recently met with the Kentucky Heritage Council, I think it was, make sure I get the right one here, and talking about the historic markers. And we need to issue a report on this, but they've made a lot of changes to the marker program recently, and some are good, some are bad, so we're talking to them about some of these changes. Some preservation, we do want to say we do have some positive preservation things. The church there at Hancock and East Market, in the upper left-hand corner, we just announced it's going to be renovated, and Bob Dylan, the famous musician and singer, is going to be involved in that. The old Joe Lay's antique store is going to be turned into a hotel. Of course, the Oddfellows Liberty Hall is in the process. 121 West Main Street, it's the last signature building on Whiskey Road that's going to be renovated. And that's going to be a great venue when that's completed. Of course, the Holy Name Convent there in the center. We're still working with the Archdiocese of Louisville to try and save that. The U of L Myers Hall was just renovated by Underhill Associates. It's fabulous thing. The U of L wanted to demolish that, and a number of us preservation organizations sent a letter to Neely Bettapudi, who was the president at U of L at the time, and convinced her to sell this to Jeff Underhill, and he renovated it. And of course, in the lower left-hand corner, that is the James Gaffney house, historic house on River Road. And it's in the process. I hear it's in the final stages of renovation.
It's beautiful.
I just wish we could have an event there, but if anyone's been there, you know logistically you just can't get there. They have no parking whatsoever. We would have to have some vans or tour buses to do that. But the person, the doctor who renovated that has spent over $500,000 in renovation, and just spectacular what he's done with it. So that's upcoming. So anyways, we've had some preservation successes, and we want to continue that going. Of course, we're working on the old Baptist Hospital. That's in process. And here we are today. So we've had two events, Preservation 101, which you saw just recently, and then We're on status of preservation in Louisville and surrounding areas. And we have 3 leaders here today of the preservation efforts here in Kentucky. I'll start with Heath Seymour, who's on the far right there, on our right. That's Heath Seymour. He's with Vital Sites. In the center, we have Craig Potts with the Kentucky Heritage Council, if I have that right. And then Betsy Hatfield here on the left with Preservation Kentucky. And I think we're going to start with who? Heath, are you going to go first?
So we'll keep with the local theme.
Okay, we're going to start with Heath Seymour. He's going to talk a little bit about Vital Sites, and I'm going to get this out of your eyeballs there, Craig. Okay. And here's another microphone. This microphone works.
Okay. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think Steve and Martina covered quite a bit of good information about the what's going on locally. I've shifted a little bit of what I was originally going to talk about, and thought I would start, because I think it's relevant, with a little bit of my background about how I got into this myself. Everybody comes at this in a different way. And so, you know, I was born in Louisville. I grew up down the road in E-Town, and took a lot of trips up here, learned stories, learned that we had people that moved to Louisville in the 1700s, so we have a deep family history, you know, in Louisville. And all those visits, going to Louisville, my sister coming up here, my family being up here, I've been able to watch Louisville from the outside and appreciate it in a different way and see there's a lot of beauty in the old houses and the old buildings. Another part of that was my dad used to work on 4th Street back in the day, which my dad's 98 going on 99, so back in the day, it's a little while back, like Selman's and anybody, you know, some of these department stores were preached. My dad would tell me stories about that and about what 4th Street was like. And so I grew up hearing that, even though I was in E-Town. And I grew up running around the little town of E-Town and downtown with all those great historic little buildings there are in those places. And so I developed a love for that back in those days when I was growing up, and I was running around old buildings. And that kind of continued on. I'm going to skip over a little bit. I've got a little artistic background. I'm going to go right over. But for 20 years before I came to Louisville, I worked in something called the National Main Street Program in about 6 towns in about 3 states. And what that involves is what you've seen a lot of here, all these demolitions that were happening going up into the 70s. Around the late 70s, the National Trust saw this as a big problem, a national problem, and so they created a program that would try to revitalize our downtowns. And so with that, I won't get into all the details of it, but they became very intimately involved in the downtowns, just kind of like what you were saying, all those little details, the magnets, stuff on the ironwork, and all these things, all those ways to have festivals and events in the downtown. You would get into everything from sidewalks and streetscapes and the temperature of the lighting and the stores and storefronts. And to do that, you had to have a lot of conversations with property owners. And to have those conversations, it helped kind of understand the perspective. Not everybody comes at it, and it's going to want to show up at an event like this on a Sunday. We're kind of specialists. We have a sort of special interest in preservation, something that tugs at our heartstrings. But a lot of people we have to interact with are property owners and they're business owners. And they come at it from a different perspective. And they think about their pocketbook more. They're kind of generalists. And they take this information that we tell them, but they process it with all these other things that come at them all the time. And they make these decisions about their buildings, and sometimes they're not good decisions. And so we have to figure out how to get our foot in the door with these folks, because they're not always going to be on our side. And a lot of times to do that, it's through the pocketbooks. It's their economic sense. And so what I mean is, when you're talking and introducing yourself to a property owner, and you're able to walk down through there, and at first it's maybe it's helping to get a new tenant in the building. They like that. That's a good thing. But then it's looking at the bricks. The guy's telling you, hey, this mortar is really soft on here. Things are falling apart. I need to hire somebody. Then you can tell them, well, the mortar's supposed to be soft. Actually, that mortar is soft for a reason. As the bricks expand and contract, if you put too hard a mortar in, all your bricks are going to start popping off. And you tell them little bits, all sorts of little information like that. Then they start coming to you as a resource. And they look at preservation as a positive thing. And they see the economic value in it. And you can go further into that. You can talk about, well, these buildings were developed over centuries. There's a lot of history there, but the history is reasonable. The scale of your windows are there because people interact with their surroundings in a certain way. They look in a certain direction when they're walking down the street. And so they scale the windows and the dividers between the windows for a reason. There's purpose, an economic purpose a lot of times. And the more they learn about it, then they start to want to get into more of these stories and more details, but it's approached from a positive way, that you're working with them and you're trying to teach them valuable things that they understand as valuable to their business, to their personal life, and then they start to appreciate the history more. And so you get your foot in the door through these sort of practical things. And I think that's a little bit about what we've been trying to shift towards with vital sites. So over the years, we might be looked at as maybe a preservation 3.0. There's Preservation Alliance in the 70s, which sounds a lot like what a Main Street program would be. And then, we've had Preservation Louisville that came around after that and went for decades. And I think Martina and Steve were talking about the changes in around 2012. You had Omni that came in, you had Whiskey Row, you had changes to the landmarks ordinance and all of these things. And there's a need to be more proactive, to try to get in front of these problems and to try to bring people on board with you and remind them that we're not asking you to do these things just to be pushy or to try to do things for just our own selfish interest. There's a reason you want to keep your buildings alive and you want to keep them vital for our community. There's a value that preservation brings to the community. And we're trying to work from that approach and to try to get ahead as best we can of some of these issues. And just to give you a little sample, we started by a combination of what's called the Louisville Preservation Fund. And so that was set up to help finance Whiskey Row. And so when you look at Whiskey Row, let's discuss that is, we've had over $1 million invested in that project. And so that's a revolving fund that's set up with the idea that at the end of this year, those funds start to revolve back into the organization. And we're currently underway to try to expand those funds greatly. We hope to be able to announce something in the future, but we're working on that. And so Vital Sites is that combination of Preservation Louisville and this revolving fund. Some examples of stuff, little things that you might have seen around town as you're driving up East Broadway. There are these 5 shotgun houses as you're approaching Baxter Avenue. And it's right there where Phoenix Hill, where there's that new development. It's a multi-story residential with the ground floor with retail. Well, we acquired 5 homes, little shotguns, and used the state historic tax credits that Craig's going to talk about to rehabilitate those, pass the credits on to the new owners. And it's a success story. If you look at the buildings, people are using those as examples of what a great little shotgun house could look like. Another one is the Schweitzer Pharmacy, and Jessica over here helped to get that listed on the National Register. The building was on the demo list, and so we acquired that, cleared up some liens, Jessica got it listed on the register, and now we're looking for a new owner to take that on and use the historic tax credits to be able to rehab that. It's a corner store over in the Portland neighborhood, 26th and Bank Street. Another one, this is a little different. We worked to bring in some students from the University of Kentucky, the architecture program, to try to do a charrette. So designs for what would be appropriate in a historic neighborhood, in a lower income historic neighborhood. And we shared those with our housing entities. So as new things which inevitably get developed, they'll be appropriate for the neighborhood. And so we've worked on those kind of issues. And these are kind of out front. Some of these are kind of, some other things we've done are kind of quieter things that you don't hear about for a while probably. But it's groundwork that we're hoping to continue and to try to find other kind of positive ways to get in front of all these things. One thing the city, I don't want to take too long, one thing the city has been doing is expanding all our historic districts. And we have 14,000 buildings that are listed right now. And there are thousands more underway. So Portland is getting expanded. You've got Chickasaw that's getting added. You've got Glenview that has been added, I believe, and others. There's work all over the town trying to expand these districts. But there's one issue that it's a complicated process and it takes a long time. It'll be great because all those will be qualified for the tax credits and that can help save the buildings. But we also need to be able to find, I think Martina and Steve kind of hinted this, other ways to identify these so that, the developers looking, there's some way that they know that if they get into this, there might be some resistance in front of them because the neighborhood has already identified properties that they love and they cherish and they don't want to see changed and demolished and all these things. And so we need to get in front of that, and that involves the neighborhood outreach and trying to work with neighborhoods to identify those sites. I think that's something we really need to do. I think we need more of this, Steve. Thank you for putting this on. More communication we all have, and we know we're on the same page. We might come at it from a different perspective or a different angle, but we all love these old buildings. And so we need to know that. We need to know what one another are doing, what we're up to, when we're not. We don't want to double up on efforts because we all have such limited time. So thanks, Steve, for putting this together so we can hear about what we all have going on. This year, like I said, we have those funds that are revolving back from Whiskey Row. It starts at the end of this year. And what we are working on right now is trying to find a way that we can combine the funds from that into low interest loans or something of this nature with the tax credit program, because there are so many historic homes that are over in West Louisville, for instance. You can drive through them by neighborhoods all the time that are getting in poor shape and they need something. And this is a way that you can possibly create a win-win situation to increase home ownership, to help people stay in their homes longer, to improve the quality of the neighborhoods, and do something for historic preservation all at the same time. So that's something we're very interested in right at the moment, and something we're wanting to continue, and hopefully as these funds come in from Whiskey Road, we'll find some interesting way to shift those to our next loans and our next projects, and start doing some good things around town.
Hello, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces. Thank you for welcoming me here today. I want to echo what Heath said, which is kind of spot on. You know, we're coming out of kind of a difficult period, right, where we dealt with COVID-19, quarantining. At the state level, we've had disasters at both ends of the state. It's been a tough time, and we're at a point now where I think really need to look at preservation in general through a new lens. We need a reset, a new preservation movement. We just completed doing our statewide historic preservation plan. Our last one was done in 2017. We just finished our new one. It's called a toolbox for saving ourselves. This is not a plan for our agency. This is a plan for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And it was developed through surveys, interacting with folks, Kentuckians from all over the state, to figure out what direction they want to see preservation go in. And this isn't all, nicely. There's some hard truths in here that I think are good. It's good for our agency to know that. It's good for citizens to read this and understand that too. We have work to do, but I think one of the things that we can start with is better communicating with one another, because we do have a tendency to retreat into our silos, maybe see ourselves as interested in different things. But at the end of the day, if we can boil down those things that where we have common interests, we're going to be able to move the ball forward again. I feel like we're a little bit splintered as a group, and it's not good for the state of preservation, not just in Louisville, but statewide. So again, my role in state government is to serve as Kentucky's State Historic Preservation Officer. I was initially put in that position under Governor Steve Beshear, and was kept in that position by Governor Bevan, and then I'm still in the position under Governor Andy Beshear. And my primary job is to implement the National Historic Preservation Act in Kentucky. We have very specific things that we're required, mandated by federal law to carry out, and that includes things that you're all familiar with. The National Register of Historic Places. We're the gatekeeper for that program at the state level. And of course, Louisville is doing a fantastic job utilizing the National Register to be able to do a number of things, not only highlight the significance of places, particularly those places that have been overlooked in our past, and they need to be recognized for the significant contributions they make to the larger community, but also to open the door to some financial incentives that other, more wealthy individuals at times have been able to take advantage of. So we're excited about the way that Louisville is approaching the National Register. Certified local government programs, another. We provide grant funds to certified local governments. To be a CLG, you have to have certain things in place. You have to have a board of architectural review. You have to have an ordinance. You have to have preservation professionals on staff. Louisville's been a long time CLG, but there are questions, right? When decisions are made, like Martina and Steve were talking about earlier, where non-professionals are making decisions about preservation outcomes, it does bring into question, well, are you following that ethic that the CRG moniker requires? So there are real issues there. But those are just two examples of how we interact directly with Louisville. There are lots and lots of others. But the big one I want to just spend a little bit of time on before I pass it off to Betsy. And hopefully there'll be some time for some real interaction between us. I'd love for it to be kind of conversational. I'm sure you have questions, things that we might be able to answer. But the really big news is that the State Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit has taken this monster leap forward, which is really exciting. We've been working on this for 8-9 years, trying to get our anemic $5 million a year tax credit program to be improved and increased. The credit was put in place in 2005 at $3 million. It was bumped up to $5 million not long after, and then it stayed stagnant until 2021. Well, in 2021, to our great delight, the legislature decided, Chris McDaniels was the legislator who really kind of pushed the legislation. But it raised the overall program cap from $5 million a year to $100 million a year. That makes Kentucky, right now, we have one of the strongest state historic tax credit programs in the country. So we were pleasantly surprised by that, but to make it even better, the following year, in 2022, that legislative session, they also put forward a bill that improved the per project cap. So before, you could only get up to $400,000. It didn't matter if you were doing an $80 million project. The most you were going to get in an incentive was $400,000. So it really wasn't moving the needle, getting those developers from outside of Kentucky to come here. The legislature raised $400,000 per project to $10 million per project. So now one project can get twice as much as the entire state got 2 years before. And it also raised the per project cap for the individual homeowner to use the state credit from $60,000 a year to $120,000 a year. So it made it more useful for your average homeowner in a historic district. So that's really big news. If you're looking at it from a straight investment standpoint, Kentucky is now very, very competitive. And we have developers from outside of the state who call us and say, we're looking for big projects. We're looking to make a big investment. We like Kentucky. Tell us where there are some great historic properties that are very large that we might be able to utilize this new incentive. Because coupled with the federal historic tax credit incentive, now you can get up to 40% of your rehabilitation costs back. And just for those who may be wondering, well, this seems like a really big giveaway. Why are we making this kind of incentive available? It's good to keep in mind that 1/3 of that incentive is paid back before the developer can even claim the credit, because of the taxes that are spurred by construction-related taxes that are paid. So 1/3 is paid back before they get it, and then the other 2/3 is paid back within 4 years. So even if we're talking about widgets, you don't even have to like historic buildings. We're talking about widgets, and I say, if you these widgets are going to pay you back, and if you give us this money, those widgets are going to pay you back in a period of 4 to 6 years, and then they'll continue paying indefinitely because you can't move those widgets out of state. It's a pretty good investment. So I think the legislature saw that, and that's why we are where we're at right now. And there's a lot of advocacy that of course, went into that. One of the things that we want to do is make the tax credit even more user-friendly for smaller projects, for homeowners with lower levels of investment that they want or need to make. There's also a challenge with the paperwork, the bureaucracy of it. I recognize I'm a bureaucrat right now, working in a state agency. I look at those applications and they can be kind of intimidating if you've never done them before. Some of it we can't avoid because it's connected with federal requirements, but we're looking at how can we make those applications easier for an average citizen who has never done this before, to make it easier for them to get this credit, to utilize this program. And one last thing that I'll mention is within that same vein, making sure that these programs and incentives aren't just for certain groups of people is a high priority for our agency. And you're going to see it referenced in our 5-year statewide plan. We have to have a bigger tent when it comes to preservation. We have to make it easier to recognize things that are significant, that maybe have some alteration. We need to make it easier to use these financial incentives, even though you may not have a background in finance. So those are some of the things that we're working on from a statewide level. Of course, all of those are going to directly relate to Louisville.
I'm Betsy Hatfield, the Executive Director of Preservation Kentucky, and I am a Louisville native. This is my hometown, so I'm excited to be here in Crescent Hill. I've lived here for nearly 35 years, primarily in Crescent Hill, and have a long history with the Louisville Historical League, back with Father Cruz and Ellen Steinberg, and Kenny Carroll is Kenny's still here. So, hello Kenny, I'm glad you're still here, and we have relationships too with some of the other partners. In fact, Preservation Kentucky could not exist without our partners and our collaborators like Vital Sites, especially the Kentucky Heritage Council. I personally, in my role, rely on them a great deal, and look forward to strengthening our alliances across the state as we move through the year. And I think Craig's right. We're trying to do a reset from COVID and still some lingering effects from that. And the other thing I want to mention, we have a board member here, Ted Sloan, and his wife Joan are here. We would not exist without a strong board and many volunteers. So Preservation Alliance, or Preservation, I used to work for Preservation Alliance back in the 70s. I do that sometimes, over the 80s. Preservation Kentucky is a 501c3 public charity nonprofit that fosters historic preservation through advocacy and education. We were formed by the Board of Commonwealth Preservation Advocates in 1998, they were a 501c3 for lobbying organization who saw the need for more public awareness and education of the benefits of historic preservation so that they could garner more public support for legislation and incentives. So we have, and I apologize, I'm going to refer to my notes, I'm a little loaded with allergens today. Our mission is to help make communities stronger, healthier, and economically sustainable by advocating the rehabilitation of historic buildings and the protection of our historic sites. Our three primary goals are to promote preservation as the proven economic developer driver that it is for stabilization, neighborhood revitalization, downtown route stabilization, heritage tourism, and jobs, to promote the positive impact of historic buildings that add to our quality of life, the character and aesthetics of our neighborhoods and downtowns, and community placemaking, and to connect Kentuckians with their heritage by helping them appreciate our historic architecture, archaeology, prehistoric sites, and historic lands. Our advocacy efforts include lobbying legislators on the state historic preservation tax credit and to support specific bills that during Kentucky's General Assembly and also federal congressional sessions. Provide public testimony. I write a lot of letters of support, and we've done op-eds for various projects, and just to alert the public of endangered buildings threatened with demolition to garner their active participation in hopefully preserving them. Our educational efforts include holding workshops and webinars and sharing publications on a variety of preservation topics and providing technical assistance to individual groups and municipalities. We have a grants program that provides financial support. Our Kentucky Fund and our Linda and Jerry Bruckheimer Historic Preservation Fund award matching grants of up to $5,000 to nonprofits, and this program is done in partnership with the Kentucky Heritage Council and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We also have an EDF Bingham Education Fund that awards grants of $500 to students earning a degree in historic preservation from the University of Kentucky to help with cost of books and study materials. Our annual Excellence in Preservation Awards, which haven't been so annual thanks to COVID. We're returning this year. We're excited about that. And this recognizes, I would by the name, excellence in preservation and leaders across the state. And in fact, since the awards were established in 2012, 15 Louisville people and projects have received our excellence awards. And if there's time at the end, I can read what all of those are. Our Tour 120 Heritage Tourism Program was launched in 2019 during National Historic Preservation Month. It was also stalled by COVID, so we'll be reintroducing it this year. And the purpose of that program is to showcase the importance of historic architecture to Kentucky communities and to raise funds to help nonprofits preserve and manage historic sites by raising awareness and increasing visitors. So I think one of our overriding challenges and goals is public awareness. And Heath and Craig have both spoken to this. It's a challenge and it's an ongoing goal. Some of our current goals would include helping more communities understand adaptive reuse and historic preservation tax credits. There are financial, cultural, and environmental incentives for incorporating historic preservation into residential, commercial, and religious projects. So helping people see the possibilities and understand the process helps. As preservationists, we have imagination, we have the vision, we can look at the worst of building and see what it can be through the preservation process, but the general public, not so much and not so often, and I think that's part of our challenge is to help people vision the possibilities. The second is to help more local governments establish plans and protections to preserve historic buildings. The Kentucky Heritage Council has two wonderful programs, the Main Street Program and Certified Local Government Programs, and not enough communities are taking advantage of this, so we will be promoting these along with other tools to strengthen preservation on the local level. The third is helping communities protect our historic courthouses, which are endangered in some counties because they're being neglected, compromised, or lost to new judicial centers. And the politics of local governments don't always align with the community and taxpayers' desires, but no farther than Oldham County. And sometimes there are compromises we have to make just to make sure that even the facades of these historic courthouses remain standing. The fourth is bridging the gap in education because there aren't curriculums with built-in incentives to teach students about history, heritage, and historic preservation. STEM neglects the humanities, so we need to devise ways to encourage teachers to incorporate historic preservation into science, technology, engineering, and math, which can be done. And students, to engage students in extracurricular activities that focus on historic preservation. Kenny Carroll wrote a wonderful book, Discover Louisville, that was written when the humanities, back in the 80s, when the humanities were in the curriculum, and I believe it was 4th and 8th graders were always looking for field trips to take their students on to learn about Louisville history and to learn about American history. So they brought them to Main Street, and as you heard, they would look for the cast iron facades, they would learn about Corn Island and the history of Louisville by actually experiencing that walk along Main and doing runnings of the coal hole covers. So it was, we had in-service teacher trainings and curriculum guides, and Kenny was very much a part of that. And with the way that the core curriculum has changed, we just need to find ways to be more engaged on that level, because as we talked about, we're trying to encourage a younger generation of preservationists to come up in the ranks, so to speak. And I think that's one of the ways we can do that. I'd say some of the issues, there are many, but some of the ones probably in the forefront this year are increasing, as I mentioned, increasing public awareness of the benefits of historic preservation. Being proactive at protecting endangered buildings is challenging because we're often reactive because we don't hear about an endangered building until it's really too late to put a thoughtful plan together. And if we can find ways to be more proactive and to be notified with more advance notice, I think we can come to the community with better planning and hopefully better preservation. Working with historic property owners who don't embrace preservation and think it's okay to diminish or destroy the integrity of a building, or even worse, buy a historic building for the express reason to demolish it, is also a big nut to crack. And a lot of people think because it's their building, they can do whatever they want, and fail to recognize when you live, especially within an historic district and one that may, hopefully it has an overlay to it, that there are certain guidelines, and there's a reason that that neighborhood retains a quality and a characteristic, and it's because people are willing to recognize the codes and the enforcement and preservation ethics. So I think working with private homeowners is probably the third one I've mentioned. That's it.
Well, thank you all very much. So again, so I guess we can start with some questions. Anyone? Yeah, Ken?
I want to ask vital sites, have you identified somebody in the Greenberg administration, one of his deputy mayors, who works with not just historic preservation, but environmental green space concerns? We formed a Loom committee to write up some suggestions for them, and still waiting to figure out who to talk to.
Yeah, for environmental, maybe. Maybe we should talk after. I'm not sure who I would say right now, but again, I'll have to think about that one.
Okay.
I don't know.
So you don't particularly know which deputy mayor is the new team is now designated? Or-
I'm trying to think. Charles, do you know? Charles? Not positive.
Well, that's not encouraging.
But I think Mayor Craig Greenberg, I think Mayor Greenberg is encouraging, because he certainly has first experience with historic preservation, and let's hope it comes from the top down, and so
Yeah.
let's hope he encourages that, maintains it.
I might have a couple ideas, but I don't know.
Yeah. Other questions that might have? Yeah, Michael.
Right here is the master plan for Bingham Park. Clifton became a historic preservation district literally 20 years ago. And we are blessed in that the Olmsted Conservancy is going to be spending a lot of money to renovate upgrade our Bingham Park. Yay, I love it. And actually, I'm on the task force for the past 3 7-gun years working on this. And my name's on there on behalf of the Clifton Community Council.
Excuse me, where is Bingham Park? Where is
Thank you. I'm sorry. Bingham Park is close to Brownsboro Road. If you are on Frankfurt Avenue and you see Coral Avenue and you turn right onto Coral, it'll take you directly into Bingham Park.
I didn't know that.
Bingham Park was established in 1915.
Yeah.
It's an Olmsted Park, hence why the Olmsted Conservancy is involved. And it's a treasure to our neighborhood. And it's very well used, and sometimes it's a little bit used with too much love and light. But it definitely needs renovation or upgrade. So 3 years this task force was working on it, and part of the task force that they kept talking about was we've got a field house in the middle of the park that was built in 1952, 71 years ago, and the architects kept saying, at every design, the field house was gone. I was like, where's the field house? It's like, well, the field house is where the bathrooms are at. Also, the neat thing with the field house is they've got an overhang of 9 feet. So last night we had a meeting, oral history of our neighborhood, and one of our residents saying that when he was a kid, he used to do arts and crafts underneath the overhang of the field house. But more importantly, he said when his family was having a picnic and it started to rain, they literally